Urban exploration is a deeply intoxicating addiction, heavily driven by the primal human urge to uncover completely forbidden secrets deliberately hidden from the rest of the world. Caleb and Nora, an adventurous young couple and veteran explorers, had spent 8 grueling months obsessively tracking down a specific urban legend that most history forums dismissed as a myth. According to fragmented archival documents leaked online, it was a massive, highly classified, Cold War-era subterranean bunker completely buried beneath the dense, isolated pine forests of the Blackwood Reserve. Heavily equipped with professional-grade tactical gear, high-lumen flashlights, and multiple backup cameras, they finally found the hidden entrance at twilight, just as the sun dipped below the jagged tree line. It was a massive, heavily rusted iron hatch, completely overgrown with thick, suffocating layers of dark green moss and dead vines, perfectly blending into the forest floor. The air surrounding the iron was unnaturally cold, carrying a deeply foul metallic scent that served as a silent, grim warning against opening it. Using a heavy industrial crowbar and exerting every ounce of his physical strength, Caleb forced the rusted iron hatch open, his boots slipping on the damp mud. The massive hinges screamed with a deafening, high-pitched metallic shriek that echoed endlessly into the dark, silent forest, instantly shattering the evening quiet and scattering unseen wildlife into the undergrowth. Beneath the heavy hatch lay a massive, pitch-black concrete shaft containing a highly degraded steel spiral staircase descending hundreds of feet directly into the dark earth. Nora carefully secured her heavy climbing harness to the thick iron railing, her hands shaking slightly from a mixture of intense anxiety and the undeniable thrill of the historic discovery. As they slowly began their long, agonizing descent, their heavy boots clanking rhythmically against the hollow metal grating, the natural twilight above them rapidly shrank into a tiny, insignificant gray dot. Moments later, they turned a sharp corner, and that dot vanished entirely, instantly plunging them into absolute impenetrable subterranean darkness. Roughly 200 feet below the forest floor, the treacherous rusted staircase finally ended on a highly cracked concrete landing that felt freezing beneath their feet. Caleb and Nora swept their powerful tactical flashlights across the cavernous space, completely amazed by the sheer, terrifying scale of the underground engineering, their beams barely reaching the distant walls. But the deep thrill of discovery was instantly shattered when Nora aimed her bright beam directly at the floor, right in front of them. The concrete was covered in a thick, undisturbed layer of white industrial dust, except for one glaring, terrifying detail. Deeply imprinted, exactly in the center of the walkway, was a fresh, distinct set of heavy military combat boot prints. The sharp edges of the footprints were still slowly crumbling inward, proving they had not been disturbed by time or the faint underground drafts. Someone incredibly large had walked through this exact spot just hours before they arrived, and they were heading deeper inside. A freezing, electric wave of pure paranoia washed over Caleb, making the hairs on the back of his neck stand up as he stared at the tracks. He instantly signaled Nora to remain completely silent, gripping his heavy metal crowbar tighter as his eyes frantically scanned the towering shadows around them. Moving with extreme caution, stepping outside the dust path to avoid making sound, they followed the menacing footprints down a long, oppressive corridor lined with dead, exposed electrical conduits and rusted pipes. The heavy tracks bypassed several small maintenance rooms, never veering, and led directly to a massive, incredibly heavy, reinforced steel blast door at the very end of the hall. The door stood slightly ajar, creating a narrow, ominous dark gap that aggressively invited them into the absolute darkness of the main facility. Caleb braced his shoulder against the cold, bleeding metal, exchanged a tense look with Nora, and slowly pushed the massive structure inward. The heavy steel door slid open with a low, agonizing groan that vibrated through the floorboards, revealing the massive, centralized command hub. The room was a vast cavern of concrete, filled with endless rows of empty, decaying operator consoles, shattered glass, and forgotten military machinery. As Nora panned her digital camera across the expansive space, attempting to capture the scale of the room, the high-definition LCD screen suddenly began to glitch violently, tearing with harsh static interference and bizarre color distortion. "Caleb, there's a massive electromagnetic field down here. My equipment is frying," she whispered frantically, her voice trembling as it struggled to cut through the heavy silence. Caleb swept his beam away from the consoles toward the darkest, furthest corner of the command hub and froze entirely. Set up carefully in the shadows, completely out of place in the sterile military environment, was a highly organized, deeply terrifying makeshift camp. There was a dirty, stained mattress, dozens of empty water bottles, and a large corkboard. Pinned to that board was a disturbing, chaotic collage of highly detailed photographs. Stepping closer to the makeshift camp, their breath caught in their throats, and their blood ran completely cold. The photographs, pinned to the concrete wall, were not old military blueprints or architectural maps of the facility. They were dozens of high-resolution, incredibly clear pictures of Caleb and Nora. There were wide shots of them hiking through the woods earlier that afternoon, entirely unaware they were being watched from the thickets. There were telephoto photos of them buying supplies at a local gas station 2 days ago. And most terrifyingly, there were close-up, perfectly clear photos taken through the glass windows of their own private apartment while they were asleep in their bed just last week. The unseen stalker hadn't just accidentally found them down here. He had meticulously hunted them, monitored their lives, and intentionally lured them into this underground tomb. A sudden, paralyzing realization struck Nora. They were trapped miles away from civilization with a highly obsessed, dangerous predator who knew their every move. "We are leaving, right absolutely now. Don't look at anything else," Caleb screamed, completely abandoning all caution as he grabbed Nora's arm, intensely dragging her heavily toward the massive steel blast door they had just entered through. The panic in his voice was raw, shattering the subterranean quiet as they sprinted across the concrete floor. But before they could cross even half of the command room, a deafening, incredibly heavy mechanical grinding noise erupted from the thick concrete walls around them, sounding like a waking monster. The ancient pneumatic systems of the underground bunker, long thought dead, had been activated remotely by an unseen hand. Caleb sprinted furiously, dragging Nora behind him, diving toward the narrow exit gap, desperately trying to reach the safety of the corridor. But they were exactly 2 seconds too late. The massive reinforced steel blast door violently slammed shut with an earth-shaking boom that rattled their teeth, permanently sealing them inside. The heavy locking mechanisms engaged with a series of final, terrifying clicks. Caleb slammed his heavy crowbar violently against the impenetrable steel door in absolute panic, screaming frantically for help. But the thick metal completely absorbed the pathetic blows without leaving a single dent. He struck it again and again until his hands were bruised and numb. But the finality of the locked door was absolute. Suddenly, high above their heads, banks of ancient industrial halogen lights mounted on the ceiling violently buzzed to life, blinding them with a harsh, surgical white glare that illuminated every corner of their concrete cage. The bunker was absolutely not dead. It was fully functional and under complete control. The rusted intercom speakers mounted in the corners of the ceiling crackled with violent static, filling the room with high-pitched feedback. A deeply calm, synthesized, and terrifyingly cold voice echoed powerfully through the massive room. "Welcome to the absolute bottom, Caleb and Nora. The surface world is permanently gone. The trial formally begins now."